Hey guys, I'm here with my friend John Roche. He's a gaffer and owner-op in New York, and we're going to have a little conversation today about the Nanlite Forza 60C, what it is, what it does, how John uses it, how I use it, how you might be able to use it in your on-set workflow. So let me start by introducing John. John, first of all, thanks for taking some time to be here with me today.
Hey, thanks. It was great. You and I met at I think in person finally at Cine Gear. Um, and yeah, so I love the 60C, and I'm happy to talk about it. And like you said, I'm a gaffer here in New York City is my home base, and I have a 3-ton grip truck. I mainly do industrials, docks, commercials, short form work, occasional feature film now and again. Um, I own a lot of pro lights, Vortex, that's spiders, DMG Dash, Stereotubes, Nanlux. And my intro to Nanlite was a number of years ago when they released the Forza 500. I got called on to do a job, sort of a promo video for them. They wanted to sort of show the high speed capabilities. They're shooting high speed with the Forza 500. And at the time, they offered me, free gear, but I'm like, no, I think I'll just take the money. But then, I ended up buying two Forzas because I thought it was a decent light at a really great price. And I started to get to know the people at Nanlite. And we started to develop a relationship. So they occasionally would send me a light to, check out, like, for example, the 60B and the 60D. Um, and so, Nanlite is part of the parent company's Nanguan, and they've sort of splintered into two companies that are run almost completely separately, Nanlux and Nanlite. And so Nanlux is the professional line, geared to the pro market. So, the lights have built-in CRMX. They're way more expensive. The Evokes, have IP ratings and so forth. And then Nanlite was kind of the prosumer brand or value brand, similar to a Godox or a Sunwell or Aperture Amaran. Um, so I think the thing that's interesting about the 60C is it's a radical departure for Nanlite. I mean, they generally were producing lights that everybody else was producing and putting their spin on it. But when the 60C came out, there really wasn't any other light like it. And it was their very first full color light. Nobody saw it coming. And so suddenly we had this full color RGB ACL light at a very attractive price. So, a lot of us, myself included, were giving Nanlite feedback. And some of my feedback on the Forza line was, guys, you got to have a consistent approach to your entire line. You can't put out the Forza 500 with DMX capability and then send me the 60B and the 60D, and there's no DMX on it. So I think they started to realize, they're really trying to with the 720B and the 720D, they were trying to up their build quality, push up right against that pro market. Now they still didn't have CRMX and they weren't IP rated, but they were trying to get as many pro features into a light at a really attractive price point. And so for me, I'll tell you, I'm friends with Andrew Locke and Luke Servald, and Andrew's in Australia, Luke's in San Francisco, and so we're in different time zones. So we trade messages back and forth. Like I was just talking to him a lot today about the 60C, and when Andrew first got him, he texted me and said, "I've already put an order in for 3." That was like 5 minutes after he had it, and I was waiting on my demo, and I'm like, "Well, screw it. If Andrew says that, it's good enough for me." So I
Yeah.
ordered 3 straight off the bat, and now I've ordered 3 more with a lot of the accessories and so forth, which we'll go through. Um, but I think the the 60C is pushing up against the boundaries of what might be considered a pro light from Nanlite, right? It still doesn't have built-in CRMX. It's not IP rated, but neither of those things are deal breakers. I mean, we use lights all the time that weren't IP rated outside. We put a little protection over them, and frankly, 90% of what I'm going to do is in a lower foot candle interior situation, right? I mean, these aren't competing against daylight. I mean, I'm sitting against windows now But in generally speaking, they're not, you're not going to use them in bright high foot candle environments. Um, and they smartly put DMX into the light. So you have to buy the optional DMX cable, but there's a mini DMX port that goes to two 5-pin XLRs. You can hook one of your CRMX dongles to it. So I bought a bunch of extra ones just for these lights. Um, and they smartly put a USB port on the bottom of the light, which they didn't have on either of the other 60s. So that was, these are all sort of nods to how we might use them in a more professional way. So I can power my Sky node directly off the light, not have to get an external battery or a second power line. And they made lots of little subtle choices. There's no Rosetta lockdown on the yoke, so you can get a smooth, transition. I mean, part of it's because it's a much lighter weight light, so they probably didn't feel like they needed a Rosetta to get a positive lock, and they gave you a smooth, transition. So when I first got the 60Cs, I was anxious to see, well, how good's the color? Like, can I match tungsten, for example? So I brought home an ARRI 300, and I just set it up right here at night, and I pulled out my meter, my Sekonic 800, and I took a reading of what I was getting, exactly what I was getting out of the 300 at 100%, and then tried to dial in the CCT values and with my meter, not on the actual screen, because I find most lights are off, whether it's a $699 light from Nanlite or a $4,000 light. I usually, when I'm on set, I match everything by meter. And so when I did that with the 60C, I got very close. I could maybe see a subtle difference, like when I was looking at my skin, going back and forth. They were really on par. Then I sent you a short video that I just did in my kitchen, going back and forth between the ARRI 300 and the 60C, and I couldn't see any difference on video. And just in terms of output, the beam angle on an ARRI 300 is slightly wider natively than it is with the Fresnel attached on the 60C. So I had to spot the ARRI in a little bit, so I had matching beam angles. And when I did that and had the ARRI running at 100%, the 60C was running at about 60%. So in terms of comparison to a tungsten Fresnel, it's probably, it's more than a 300, but probably a little less than a 650, which is pretty impressive, frankly, for a tiny little,
considering the size.
60. Yeah,
Right.
considering the size and interestingly, if you look at the okay, what are the competitors to the 60C? I mean, there's nothing in the price range. I think now, as some time has passed since the light came out, there are some other competitors that have entered the market. So you could put like the Filex P3 Color. You could put even the Filex Q5. Now, the Filex Q5 is a Fresnel. The P3 is a smaller unit, similar to the 60C, that you can put different optical accessories, including a zoom, a Fresnel that spots and floods. But you're looking at least double the price. So you're gaining, IP rating, you're gaining some other things that you may or may not need. But very interestingly, I own two Filex Q5s. Now, those are $2,500 if you went to B&H today and bought them. And I put them in my shop side by side with this and the Fresnel. And I was getting a little more, I felt, out of the 60C.
Wow.
At best, I would say, again, it's only a Fresnel. That's the other issue, right?
Right.
The huge advantage, I think, for us owner operators, traveling DPs, guys with vans, the huge advantage of cob lights in general, right? Cob lights, chip on board, LED lights, is that they're like Swiss Army knives, right? So we'll look at this later, but you can use that cob light into an umbrella. You could put a lantern on it. You could put a softbox on it. You could put a projection mount, Fresnel, reflector dish. I mean, there are a lot of options, which for me, I have a 3-ton truck. So if I can have a light that can kind of, transform into other things, given what I'm up against, and oftentimes we don't know that right till we're there, it's really, really nice. And that's true of my other lights, whether it's a ProLight 300 or a ProLight 675 or Forza 500. I mean, all these cob lights have that ability And look, it's no slight on Filex. I mean, Filex is probably the gold standard in optical Fresnel quality, and the Fresnel from this and the Fresnel from some of my other lights are not going to be quite as good, but it's not bad. And so I
Hmm.
think this is really the question about the 60C is like, wow, what are what are the plus and minuses? Because anytime you're looking at, and I own a lot of pro lights, but I also own a number of what I would call value brand lights. So,
Hmm.
for example, the Amaran line from Aperture, I own four of their flex lights. I own Intellitech Mega Claws. And now, Forza 500s. I own. I had also, which I've sold, with the 60D and the 60B, and the 300D because they've been superseded now over time by better lights. The 60C is brighter than the bicolor with all the extras you get,
Right.
not just the DMX and the onboard USB port, but full spectrum, full color in an RGB ACL. Um, so what should we talk about next? Well, I guess one of the first things is you really should look at Andrew Locke's review of the 60C because he goes
Yeah.
through a lot of the good uh, pros and cons. And uh, I think if there's an Achilles heel or if there's a deal breaker, if you're considering buying this light, there's only one thing I could think of that would be a deal breaker for some people. And that is, this is really not a cueable light. Meaning, if you need a light to do crossfades, if you're on wireless DMX or wired DMX or app or whatever, this light cannot do a smooth, you get steppy dimming. So if you need to have transitions or that's a big part of your work, this probably is not the light for you. Now, whether that can be fixed in a firmware update, I was discussing that with Andrew Locke today, and I don't know. My suspicion is it's about the internal processing speed and math that has to go on and
Possibly.
all. But I don't really know. I mean, that's probably a question for Nanlite down the road because there are some things so far that Nanlite has not implemented vis-a-vis their app. Now, their app has improved dramatically. I used it a number of years ago, and it was crap. But
Hmm.
I used it recently, and they've made significant improvements. Now, the one thing they have not yet implemented is gel mode. That's forthcoming in some future not beta, future firmware release, where they'll add. Now, I don't know what that's going to be, whether they'll license Roscoe or Lee, or whether they'll just give us a selection of you know different gel mode gel mode gel mode choices. But the app is fully functional. And when I first got these, I own the Gaffer's Control right for my DMX, and I had bought Blackout but hadn't started using it yet. So the first day I was on set, we were shooting a documentary interview, and the director said, "Oh," and it was a documentary of a painter who had these sort of abstract, colorful paintings. And she said to the DP, "Hey, I'd really love to pick out some of these colors and use them in the background." And I happen to have, I forget, three or four of these with me.
Hmm.
But I didn't have DMX yet. And so I went up to the painting with the app and I could select like the cyan in the painting, and then it would immediately transfer that color to the light.
Hmm.
And I have to say, I was surprised. It was pretty damn close.
Hmm.
And we went to a yellow and we grabbed that yellow with the color picker in the app, and and it was perfect. Now, granted, it wasn't a critical color choice. We wanted to kind of be in the ballpark of the particular colors in the painting,
Right.
but the app worked, quite well. And then, I could dim it and I could control. I don't normally use apps because I have too many different brands of lights. So I like everything to be on
Right.
a CRMX controller. So, even given that I've said this light's not cueable, doing that on set is probably less than 5% of my workflow. Most of the
Hmm.
jobs I'm doing docks, I'm doing industrials. It does come up, and I figure if it comes up, I might have to rent some more expensive lights that are capable, in this size. Maybe, because the competitors, we talked about Filex. The other competitor would be, which still isn't released yet, would be the new Dado Neo, which has
Hmm.
the Pro Light engine. It's basically a small LED dado, similar to the old ones they made. I forget what they were, L7, I forget what they were called, but it's the new dado. But that's a $2,000 light without the
Right.
projection mount. Once you add the dado projection mount to that, you're probably looking at a $3,500 tool. But you get these other advantages of IP rating and so forth and so on. Whereas here, I think if you went all in with all these accessories, with the, probably with the, especially with the discount from Kit List, you're probably maybe looking at $1,100 somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, I think we spec, because Nanlite and I've been on some calls about this. I think we spec'd out with everything at full price, and that is, you're talking about the Fresnel, the barn doors, the lantern, the softbox, the 19-degree lens, the 36-degree lens. It's around 1498
Yeah,
for
yeah,
everything. And one of the we've had a few conversations, before this call, and both of us, I think, agree that this light really shines in that it's able
yeah,
to do so many different things.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, just
100%. Yep.
just hopping back to, if you're watching this and you don't know who Andrew Locke is or Luke Servild is, they have two excellent YouTube channels. Andrew Locke's is called Gaffer and Gear, and Luke Servild's is called Meet the Gaffer. And if you're looking for more information on this light, both of them have, Andrew's especially is very detailed review of what
Yeah,
this light can do, including measuring intensity. So go check that out.
yeah. Yeah, and I point out that Andrews is great because he'll look at the quality of the barn door cuts, he'll look at the quality of the shadows from the Fresnel. He'll show you the projection mount and kind of give you the plus and minuses. And one thing he pointed out to me was that, and this is true with aperture lights and other lights, is some things will fit on other things. Like you could put the projection mount onto the 60C; it works perfectly fine. I use it all the
Mm.
time. It wasn't designed for this style cop. The style on the 60C, if you look at it, is different than on the daylight or the bicolor version. So one of the issues that Andrew pointed out was that on the projection, if you just projected the circle onto a wall, you'd see there's a little bit of drop off on the edge. For my use, that doesn't matter at all because you put
Hmm.
a gobo in, it's outside the safe area of the gobo. 99 times out of 100, I'm using my gobos out of focus. Or if
Right.
I'm doing a cut, I'm using it out of focus. It all blends together at that point. Once if for some reason you're using it sharp and you wanted it as a very sharp gobo projector, there might be a couple of situations where maybe it was an issue, but by and large, it's a non-issue to me and in my workflow. And
Same.
you
I
know,
love how he tests, the sharpness of the gobo.
yeah,
But I feel like I don't remember I don't use it like that myself. I never want it super sharp because it's
sharp.
such
No,
a
me either. Me either.
distinct look.
Yeah, I can't even think of the last time I used a gobo that wasn't out of focus, and usually quite a bit out of focus. Because it's usually some
Because
kind of breakup or
right,
whatever.
because if it's in focus, it just looks like a gobo
Yeah,
projector. I mean,
yeah, yeah. Even like a Venetian blind pattern or something, it needs to be a little bit out of focus.
100%.
Yeah. So let me just take a look.
Well, one thing we could talk about is
Yep.
just, get into the light itself and
Yeah. Let's do that. Yep.
what's some configurations that some of your go-to configurations, since there are so many options, I guess.
Yeah. So why don't I come back and since what I get? Okay. So what I have in front of me is this case is the size case you get when you order the 60C, what they call the FM projection kit. It
Hmm.
comes packed in this. When you order just the light, it comes in this. And what I've managed to do is get pretty much everything that was in this kit, plus everything that was in this kit, into the single kit. Um, so let me just. Now, I wouldn't, if I was a rental house, I would never send it out like this. But
Right.
I've got just laying on top. I've got the Fresnel, but this thing is very robust. It's and it's roughly $100.
Right.
So I've just got that sitting on top. This is actually there's like cardboard or some I don't know whatever in here that protects it. So it's even if it takes a hit, I don't think this lens is going to get broken. I've been doing this for a couple months now. You've got this lovely Bowens mount to FM. So the FM essentially is exactly like the Bowens mount, but it's smaller. right? So if
Hmm.
you have a bunch of Bowens accessories, you want to use a particular softbox or lantern or whatever, you can use this adapter. And what's really nice about this is it has an umbrella mount. And I
Is
have
that
to
what
tell
you're
you,
using right there for your key?
that's what I've got sort of a little key here.
That's
Um,
lovely.
Now, what's interesting is I never used umbrella. I mean, I've been doing this since like mid 90s. I didn't
Hmm.
use umbrellas until a couple years ago when I was visiting Hudson Spider and I
Hmm.
was looking at the Hudson Spider into they have a bunch of umbrellas they sell. They're made by Westcott, I think, and this
Yep.
is a Westcott umbrella. And I was like, damn, if that isn't really lovely quality.
Hmm.
And then you could also buy, not from Nanlite, but I don't know, Kupo, whoever makes them, you can buy just a regular thing that you could put any of your cob lights on, like a Forza 500, and push it into an umbrella. And what I discovered is they make silver umbrellas. They make sometimes soft silver, hard silver, white, gold, even what they call diffusion ones that you can actually push the light through, which I don't really use. I sort of fell in love with the silver ones because it has a little bit of specularity that comes off of it,
Hmm.
which is really, really lovely. And this would be something I might use in a lower foot candle environment. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily use it against windows like this, where you could be having quite a change in the volume of light that you have to match. This would be an underpowered unit until later in the day when you could use this in a really effective way. And same thing, with the lantern. I've been using lanterns way more than I used to. I mean, back in the day, we used paper lanterns or gem balls,
Hmm.
but now every cob light can take a lantern. And so the fact that you can have it on wireless control, and in this case, full color control, I just love it. And I've been using, like I said, I've been using the umbrellas a lot more. Um, so got your standard reflector dish. I think you and I talked about this. Is not my favorite accessory. It does make the light particularly small and compact. It's not horrible, but I don't see any reason why I wouldn't just always stick the Fresnel on it and have full spot flood range and just more. I think optically it's better.
Right.
Um, so I've got the light in here. I've got the secondary lens for the projection mount. So you could buy it with just a 19 lens. You could buy it with just a 36 lens, or you could add the second lens, which all my kits now have both lenses. So the beauty of this thing is it's so friggin' lightweight.
So lightweight.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew just sent me some stuff he was shooting down in Australia. They were doing an exercise video, and he used almost every one he had, like 8 of these, just to get nice shapes on background walls and on
Hmm.
columns. And it was just like the perfect tool. And if there's any negative about this, well, in fact, a few hours ago, Andrew did post one safety concern with the blades on this. And he said that some of his blades on the edges were dull and had been dulled down, but he had a few that were quite sharp. And one of his guys actually cut his finger. So he was suggesting to people, to check their blades to be sure that they were,
I'm
mine
looking at
seemed to be
mine.
dulled down. Yeah,
Mine are as well.
mine seemed to be fairly dull. Um, so I suspect there might have been one batch that didn't get through whatever secondary process they do to take the edge down, and it may
Right.
just be his light or But he felt it important enough to put out on his YouTube a few
Well,
hours
yeah,
ago.
it becomes a knife if it's not dull. This is a knife right here.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So maybe I'll take a closer look at that. I mean, I don't know. He was concerned because one of his guys cut his thumb or whatever. So he was trying to take care of that so it wouldn't happen again. I don't mine don't seem to be particularly problematic. So maybe it was just a limited problem. Um, so the problem that most and this is an interesting point, is that I find like manufacturers are desperate and dying to hear feedback on their stuff. So I'm always emailing Nanlite or Aperture and saying, hey, why didn't you do this? Or, we'd really love to have that. And the projection amount is fantastic. Now, they made this one, which is the FM, right, which is the size. They make a bigger one, same thing, but bigger for Bowens mount that'll fit like a Forza 500 or a Forza 720, and is optically aligned for those lights and is probably double the cost of this one. And Aperture has a similar one, but neither Aperture nor these guys made the barrel of the light be able to rotate.
Mm.
And I remember talking with one of the designers at Aperture, and they're like, well, why do you need the barrel to rotate? And it's standard on any ETC. Like when we grew up with Source 4 fixtures, that came out of the theater, it was a very standard thing. So they thought we would want to rotate the gobo pattern. But in fact,
Hmm.
we often need to rotate the shape of the blades. So having the barrel be able to rotate allows you to do that. So that's one of the things I said to Nanlite was like, look, when you come out with version 2, let's introduce a rotating barrel. Now, the plus to this is so lightweight. I ended up getting, I forget what they're called. They're like the swivel baby pins that you can
Oh,
rotate and it
sure.
has a
Hmm.
lock. And so I could just put this onto my stand, put the swivel baby in, and then I can just adjust it as need be. Um, and so I would say this and the Fresnel are my primary go to tools. I love it with the 19. I do often use them with CRLS reflectors
Hmm.
in, again, low light environments, right? Because I use the same thing like a Joe Lico, with an 800-watt Joker with a Lico with a 19 or 14-degree lens and push it into a CRLS. But if you're dealing in low foot candles, this thing could really hero. And you can match, because it's a full color light, you can, get any color you want coming back to you off a CRLS reflector. Or, I often use them straight too, gobos, without gobos. And they're pretty good with precise cuts. Like if you're doing tabletop work, for example, you can get a very good precise cut, sharp cut if you needed to highlight a, label on a bottle or what have you. And then you can also, it comes with a set of gobos and a gobo holder. The iris, I think, is an extra option. That's my recollection. The iris, I think, is an extra option if you need that. And the DMX cable is an extra option. So, um, what else did I want to say about this? See, the other thing I wrote to Nanlite is right now they only have a 19 and a 36, and this is bright enough where I could use a 50. I would love to have a 50-degree, and I'd love to have like a 10-degree. So I'm hoping that once they realize the popularity of this,
Mm.
and I honestly think this light will be their best-selling light. I mean, I don't know if that's true yet, but I think this light, heroes like in so many ways. Like if you don't need a cubable light, uh, it's fantastic in so many different permutations, and that's the bulk of my work. Again, docks and so forth, where you're just setting levels and you're rolling, right? You're
Hmm.
not having to do, it's not a narrative feature where you're having to do crazy stuff. Um, and I haven't even, truthfully, I've not even played with the effects modes on this because
I haven't either yet.
I rarely have to get, I think a couple times recently I've had to do cop car, and all these do cop car, and with
Right.
plenty of variations, blue, red, blue, white, blue, so they all do that kind of stuff. So one of the things as an owner op that I, just in terms of like, you and I talked about this before we hopped on the call, but how do you, like, there are all these extras, right? You've got the projection, you got the Fresnel. I I basically put all that stuff into here, and I do it as a package deal
Hmm.
rather than say, okay, the light's $50 or $70 or whatever, and
Hmm.
the Fresnel is 10, and it's like because I want to have everything with me because I don't know what I'm going to need when I get there. You might have a good idea sometimes, but oftentimes it's like you think, oh, I'm just going to need a Fresnel. And like, oh, shit, if I had the projection, I could really do this the right way. So to me, putting everything into a kit and giving one price is better for me for return on investment because every time I rent it, every single item I bought is getting paid for. And then this is just a tiny little softbox, like every other softbox we've all seen. It's perfectly graded. This is the lighter diffusion. It has a heavier diffusion. They call it their FM softbox, but they smartly send it out. You can change the plate out and put a Bowens mount, so it's
Hmm.
cross compatible. If you want to put it on a Forza 500, whatever you could. So I like that, and it comes with the standard uh, inexpensive LCD egg crates.
Right.
Um, And do you remember how much this is? It's like nothing. It's like what's
It's
$50
really,
or
I think it is. Yeah. I don't want to say a price because I don't have it in front of me, but
yeah,
it's
it's
really
stupid cheap.
inexpensive.
It's stupid cheap. I bought a couple of these. So if I'm in a tight room or something where I want to keep people with those, I can do it. Um,
One thing
the
I actually use
Yeah.
that softbox for is, you know, it comes with this little the handle, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen, where you can mount the
Oh
battery
yeah. So
right to
yeah, I
the
have that
handle.
here. This you're talking
And
about this,
so
right?
yeah, so just put it so this light's actually running on the battery right now. And at first I thought I saw the little softbox and thought I'm not going to use that too often.
Yeah.
But I find that when I have it in Hollywood mode running off a battery, that little softbox is the first thing I grab because it's
Yeah.
so light, it's so small, it's so easy to just hand hold it, throw the softbox on, throw a battery
Yeah.
on, and you're running around and it's even easier to hold than like previously I think a lot of people would ask for like an Astra 6X with a softbox, but that doesn't have
Yeah.
you have to kind of grab the yoke with that. With this you've actually got a handle and
Yeah.
everything. It's easy.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a bad. I mean, I could throw the softbox on, but I don't normally stock this kind of battery, but I had gotten a few for some one-off project I did. So I've actually never used this yet on set, but I think it could be. There's also a stand mount underneath here, so it could, if you had to, you could set it on a stand and just run it off these batteries. I can't even tell you how long these last because I've not done any testing with it yet,
Right.
and I was kind of surprised that it was included, but even if you just use it as a handle without the batteries. Now, Andrew told me he doesn't use this handle. He found a couple of, he likes to use like V mount batteries. So he found a cable that would go from here essentially to a DTAP cable. I think he had to use two
This is VMount right
cables.
here. So
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
not, I,
this might be news since Andrew's video because this is their version with the V
oh,
mount bracket.
oh, so that's different than what I'm holding here.
Yeah, you have the NPF version, and this is the same
Oh,
thing, but this has just got a V mount bracket on it. So that's
so are
what
they,
I'm
because
running.
all mine that I purchased came with this. So have they
Hmm.
switched it to a different bracket now?
I think they still come with the NPF mount, but you can get the V mount instead.
Ah, oh,
Which
gotcha. Okay.
I'm like you. I don't have a lot of the Sony NPF batteries. All my
Yeah.
stuff is V mount because I'm
Yeah.
also a DP, so I have cameras. And so I asked them specifically when we were in conversations about this to send me this V mount uh, battery bracket holder, and it's pretty
Yeah.
handy.
Now that you mentioned, I think I actually have one that they sent me with the 60 bicolor
Okay,
um, with the V mount on it. Now, do you remember? Does it take? I don't remember. Does it take 14? Was it only 14 4-volt batteries V mount, or does it take 26? I can't.
so that's a good question.
I don't know if this has because some of their lights, like the Forza 500s, I run off. I think might only run off 26 volt. So I don't know whether this light. It doesn't have it written on it, so we have to look
Well,
into that. I don't know.
all I have on here now is the Anton Bauer. This is one of those the Titan micros. The
Okay, okay.
150-watt Titan
Yeah, yeah,
micros.
yeah. But 14 4 though, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a 26.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't take much power. It doesn't take much juice to run this. You can have a pretty small battery on it and run it for quite some time. I don't want to give numbers here because I haven't done any
Yeah.
detailed testing, but just field testing, the light will run. And one thing we talked about in some of our calls before we ended up, shooting this is that
Right.
uh this light for its size and its price, it's
Yeah.
actually gives you a significant output. I hardly ever run this light at 100%
I
intensity.
know. We were talking about that, and I was saying that I've had these out maybe on whatever 15, 20 different jobs, and again, docks, little industrials, whatever. Um, and this is true of other lights too. I'm looking around the room very frequently now and going, shit, I don't have a single light that's over like 30%. I think it's important to realize like that this is, um, RGB ACL, right? Red,
Mm,
blue, green, amber, lime, cyan. Um, no white emitters in this light. It's similar. A couple other manufacturers do that. ProLight does that also. Their RGB ACL aperture is different. They do RGB WW, as many other people do. Is one better than the other? That's really a big source of contention right now. When I was talking to Andrew, his feeling was that RGB ACL has a wider color gamut. You can get to certain colors better on RGB ACL than you can on RGB WW. For example, yellows are a little bit easier to achieve and better looking than they are on RGB WW. Now, you and I talked about this. For my work, I'm rarely using saturated colors. I'm rarely doing crazy colors. I mean, maybe once in a blue moon if a music video or some weird project comes up. But by and large, 95% of my work had been in the tungsten daylight spectrum. But now we're seeing situations where somebody might be by a window. And so we have the ability now, this light has multiple modes, not only HSI, but XY. And XY's, if you have a Sekonic meter, you could take your ambient light coming through the window, which isn't necessarily going to fall right on that perfect scale of daylight tungsten. Like adding some, green or magenta might not get you to where you need to be, but you could do an XY reading also on the app. Right now, it's not working on the app. They need to do a couple corrections to that. But and you could start to match, and you could source match. If you have a weird light, you could hold and take an XY reading. You could also do it with HuSat, and you could then try to match your fixture. For myself, I find that this is my personal opinion, I think you really need to have a Sekonic meter to do that. But for a lot of places you can get by with eye. I was surprised when I was talking to Andrew yesterday. He said, I don't like to leave the house with my meters. They're going to get mucked up. They're going to get banged. They're going to go out of calibration. I got to do all this testing. So he said, unless he really knows he needs to match something with a spectrometer, he leaves it at home. Where I use mine every day, just every time, even on a doc interview, I want to be sure all my lights are lined up, all my all my green, magenta, everything's on par. And then we can muck with it if we want, right? But it's like I try to get where I need to be and be accurate. And then we say, let's take that key or the edge down to 32 or 45 or whatever. And then we can start to muck around with it, but we sort of start with a level playing field. So I think the advantage of this is that you can get any color you want practically. Now there's a whole set of other issues where, different cameras will render, colors differently.
Right.
And then you have the problem of, let's say you have Pavo tubes and you have these and you have aperture lights and you have you have multiple brands of lights. There will be situations you get into where you might find it's difficult to get all the colors from the different lights to match. But that's the world we're in right now, right? Everybody, there's no standardization among manufacturers to use one chipset and one approach. And so, it's just what we have to deal with. So that said, I've been super happy with the color this is giving me, the quality it's giving me, especially at low output levels. And I'm working more and more often at low output levels. So having all these, choices, whether it's the Fresnel or the projection or even a lantern. I did some exterior work. I should drop the lantern and show you. But I mean, it's like every other lantern we all know, but it's really quite a good quality product. For being that it costs no money at all. It comes with a complete skirt, and you can roll the skirt up. And you'd be surprising outside at night. You want to maybe you want to match the very late setting sun color, that really deep, blue that comes after magic hour. And you could keep tweaking that as the light's changing, and you just need a fill light, but you kind of want to be within the range of the color that's happening. You can do that with a full spectrum, full color light that you couldn't do any other way than by adding gels with, a bicolor or a daylight or a tungsten unit, So I think.
Right. So many people talk about full color as if the only way to use full color is in like a music video. When reality, to my use case, full color is about finessing the color
Yeah.
into, what you're trying to either replicate or emulate,
Yeah,
which can be,
100%.
like you
And
said, like daylight is
yeah,
not, people, we say daylight, and it's like, well, daylight's 5,600 Kelvin, but that's not
yeah,
really true very much of the day. I mean, there's all
yeah,
sorts of times and places where daylight's not 5,600 Kelvin, and you want to make your scene, moody, or you want to match a certain
yeah.
time of day. Early morning sun is completely different than noon sun, which is completely different than what you're talking about, like the blue hour. I mean,
Yeah, and it's interesting because and Luke and Andrew and I talk about this a lot, and well, I should speak for myself. I feel this year is the death of bicolor lights.
mm,
Now we'll still see bicolor in the larger cob lights, but we're seeing such a rapid movement. Um, and DPs and everybody, frankly, the genie's out of the bottle. We now have lights that are capable of producing any colors. Why would we want to have anything else on set with us?
right.
Because it's just about like every job, it's about having choices. I always want to, I bring extra stuff with me that I don't necessarily charge for, just so I know I have options and I can do better work and I can give the DP more options. And so I think these fall right into that. It's like now I've got a fully color tunable light. uh, and these days, especially on lower budget stuff, you don't always get a scout. Maybe you're lucky if you get
Right.
location pictures, and then you
Hmm.
show up and you realize they got this funky lights that we can't turn off, or we need to match what all this stuff comes up that you wouldn't have thought. So when you have a
Hmm.
kit like this, I feel like it's a really good way. I mean, I'm already ordering more. Like originally I thought I just have 3 projectors, and I'm like, shit, I think I just want every light to have a projector, Fresnel, DMX cable, just the whole thing ready to go. And I was like, some of the guys were asking the other day, like, oh, it'd be really nice to have a 3 light kit. But, I've got everything in this one kit. And it's really great for me as an owner op because I do jobs in my truck, which is a bigger 3-ton, 14-foot box truck. But I also get a lot of calls to do, little corporate interviews or doc
Right.
interviews out of my SUV. So maybe I only need to grab 2 of these or 3 of these or 4
Hmm.
of these. So I like having them packed separately. It doesn't seem to
Yep.
be a big inconvenience, because once you start getting all the accessories, it starts to become a bigger and bigger case. And if I've got 3 in one, well, I only need 1 on a job, or I need 2 on a job.
Hmm.
So for me, it's a little bit, for my workflow and my client base, it makes more sense to have the stuff packed separately and just grab X amount that I need for any particular job. And sure, some jobs I'll take 6, but other jobs maybe 1 or 2. So, but it just constantly for me has been a hero, light. It's just so versatile. And, look, and I should be clear, I'm not getting any financial compensation. I have a
Right.
relationship with Nanlite. I talk to those guys all the time. They do occasionally send me a few free things. They do give me a discount. I did get a discount when I bought all my lights, but I've spent years building a relationship with them, and in the same way I have with Aperture and Nanlux and multiple other brands. So, but I don't really have what's the expression, a dog in the race or whatever. I love this product. I think it's a
Hmm.
great product. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but it's a light that's produced to be as close to a pro light, to give a lot of pro light features at a particular price point. And so I think you need to weigh whether, if there are any deal breakers in that equation with this particular light for your
Right.
workflow. For me, there were no real deal breakers. There are a couple of issues I felt like I can work around that. IP
Hmm.
rating, it's not going to be an issue for me.
Hmm.
I used to cover ARRI 300s and tungsten HMIs outside in the pouring rain all the time. Even when I
Right.
had my sky panels, I had to do that. So, it's not the end of the world not to have IP. It's not the end of the world not to have CRMX. So I think,
Especially at this price point, right?
yeah,
I
at
mean,
this price point, it's crazy. I mean, it really is, what, and Nanlite's doing it well. Aperture's certainly doing it well. I mean, there's a lot of other brands that are trying to, push up, Soonwell is trying to push up against the pro market. I think Andrew's next review is on the 900-watt bicolor Soonwell. I mean, this is another a good point. Is like the market we're in now. When I was around in the 90s, I'd buy an ARRI 300 or a Mole Richardson, tweeny. That light would last me 15 years. And when I bought
Hmm.
another one, it was just to replace the same model that looked a little bit nicer and wasn't as beat up, but it didn't have any more new features. Now, 3 or 4 years ago, I was saying, man, I really feel like any light I buy is going to only last 3 or 4 years. Now,
If
today, I'm
that.
saying any light I buy has a 1 to 2 year window period because the technology is moving so fast. So that makes, I think, lights like this and say less expensive lights more and more attractive. We're also seeing a lower amount of days that we have to rent them. Our ROI, when I started, ROI on a light was usually 40 or 45 days. Now it's usually 15 to 20 days.
Right.
So I think, look, will I have this light 2 years from now? I don't know. Maybe I don't know. So I really feel like the lights I buy, I want to be sure I'm using often, renting
Hmm.
often. They're getting paid off quickly. I'd really like to get stuff paid off in 6 months or certainly less than a year.
Hmm.
Um, and look, they still have value. I mean, I'm at the point now where there's some lights I bought less than a year ago that I'm already selling because they've been superseded by newer lights. Now I still
Right.
sold them at a reasonable price. I didn't lose that much money, but I kept myself current. And so that's, part of me is when I saw this light, I'm like, this is my dilemma. Do I go with a very expensive dado light? Do I go with the Filex P3? What is the kind of work I do? And also, I felt like I needed 4 to 6 of these. And spending
Right.
maybe $5,000 or whatever that comes to for 6 kits
Right.
um, was a whole lot more attractive than having to spend a lot more money to get these other features that on 90% or maybe even 95% of my jobs are not going to be applicable.
Right.
So for me, if there's a few jobs every now and again that I'm like, all right, I need a cubable light, I need to do crossfades, I got to hire a programmer. Okay, so these lights don't work that job. No big deal because 95% of my jobs, these lights are going to be perfect. And
Hmm.
I'm getting them for a fraction of the price. Now, that's no snub off Data or ProLight. I love ProLight. I love Mitch. We talk all the time. I've bought a lot of ProLight gear. I was on the band with the new 675s. But that was a $2,800 pre-sale price. It's now $3,500 unit. Very
Right.
different than this light. But I would say the color metrics are not. It's not like the color metrics of the pro light. I'm pointing over there because the pro light's over there. The 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 color metrics now, even on inexpensive lights, are very close to even the higher end pro lights. It's I'm thinking it's more in some of these other ancillary features where starting to distinguish a pro light from a say prosumer or non-pro or light that's coming like this one right up to the cusp of being pro. So the fact that you can get color that's on par with much more expensive lights, I think is fantastic, and I think that's across the board. Even I'm seeing one by one panel lights that are coming out now for $600 or $700 that have fantastic color metrics. They don't have as rich feature set, but
Right.
but there it's so it to me the low end of the market is very exciting right now. It didn't used to be that way,
Yeah.
but now
I saw.
it's
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, that was my thought.
I saw this, on the internet, and was like, this isn't something I'm super interested in. I have a lot of
This way,
yeah, I have a lot
yeah,
of full spectrum, full color lights. They're a lot
yeah,
brighter.
yeah,
And then I went to Cine Gear where we said hey for the first time, and I
yeah,
was
yeah,
walking by through the Nanlite booth and I saw it with the 19-degree projector mount on it, and I saw how
yeah,
small it was because sometimes you
yeah,
can't tell how the size from online. I thought it was more
yeah,
like just a bigger light, to be honest with
yeah,
you. And I saw how
yeah,
small it was and how much output it was
yeah,
sending, and I was like, "What? Wait a second." And I double checked the price with the one of the booth attendees, and I just thought,
yeah,
man, I should really think about getting one or two or three of these just for
yeah,
versatility. And then I think maybe the week after you and Andrew started posting in Gaffer Salon, which
yeah,
by the way, if you're not
yeah,
in Gaffer Salon, it's one of my favorite Facebook groups on the internet, just and run and started and moderated by John Roche himself. So John, thanks for Gaffer Salon. But you and
Yeah.
Andrew were talking about, how many of these you owned and and I was just like, okay, well, these are
Yeah.
recommendations from two guys working at the top of their game here. So I'm definitely adding at least a few of these to my kit. And since I have not done a single job where I have not used it. Not a single
Yeah.
job.
I have to say that's true. I bring them, like again, there's so many times where you don't know what you're going to need. And I, as an owner operator, I have a different approach than rental houses. Like, because half the time, quite frankly, I do have a business partner, but the gear's going to be sitting in my shop. Now, I don't want to give away stuff. I need to make my money back and so forth. But you really start to win clients, and particularly DPs, because that's really, who's hiring is the DP, right? It's
Right.
like if I can support them and I have to bring a few extra things, and it's all because I want to try out new options. I want to show new things I have. I want us to be protected for whatever comes down the pike. And so, I bring what I can within reason that's extra. So I feel like, I'm covered on this job. And, that's just the way I like to work and I'm able to work. And the more gear I get, the easier it is. And so, gear that's, like the Amaran product or like some of Intellitek's, the Nanlite 60C in particular. I think they just really, they really hero. I've not had any issues with any of my Nanlite products since I've owned them. In fact, nor have I had any with Aperture or with Intellitek. So, they're it's surprising. Like the build quality is reasonably good. It's not as good as say ProLite 675, but it's also
Mm,
not $3,500. I mean, there's certain compromises, but I think anybody that looks at this, like, it's pretty friggin' well put together. It feels really
right.
solid, robust. The lockdown's positive. You've got all these things on here that you would need. And the cool thing about these, now that we're kind of like the camera guys, we're in a menu-driven, firmware-driven world, right? When I started, literally, I had an on-off switch, right, a set of scrims, and spot flood. I mean, that's pretty much it,
Right.
right? So now the cool thing is that they can continually improve the light through firmware updates, right? They can improve
Right.
the app. They can improve, many things. They can add modes. So that's what's cool about a lot of lights we own now is that it continually gets improved. Both from user feedback and bug reports and whatever else. I don't like to be like the beta tester guy, but I think it's also cool that when something is an issue or there's something that could be better, we can relate that back to the manufacturer, and then maybe they'll put that on the agenda for the next firmware update, and then suddenly, okay, we got it. And I've seen that happen many, many times with Aperture, with
Right.
Roscoe DMG, many, many products. They listen to what's going on and they quickly implement it. So,
There was one thing that really surprised me when Nanlite sent me this light. That's such a minor thing, but it's indicative of my general feeling towards Nanlite and this light in particular. So when I opened, and maybe you care about these things and maybe you don't, but when I opened the package, I was surprised at how detailed and nice even the packaging was. Even the little bags that everything came in were
mhm.
just like it was quality, even though it was disposable. It
Yeah,
felt like almost like I was opening an Apple product where they put a
yeah,
lot of time and thought into the case, into the foam, into the little bags that everything's coming in. As I was opening it, I was just like, wait a second, this is not what I expect from now, because we're talking about a value brand. And in
yeah,
my experience with value brands, especially prior to maybe 2 or 3 years ago, is they
yeah,
skip every aspect of the process that other
yeah,
companies like Apple and Airy and Light Panels put a lot of thought and energy into, which is like the
yeah,
packaging, the whole experience of unboxing it and feeling like, no, we
yeah,
thought about everything along the way, including the box that you're going to throw away. And
yeah.
once I saw that, I thought, okay, I'm already impressed because this isn't what I expect from like a $699 fixture.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's a lot of value, you know, for your money. And that's, because look, as a guy that works in the pro market, I can't show up with shit that doesn't work or
Mm,
that's funky or the colors are off or that, you so that, I have to test stuff. And there's a lot of times too that I'll do no, I don't have any modifications for this slide, but like the Teletech Mega Class, I've modified those heavily, mainly in
mm,
terms of their diffusers and the diffusion frames. And I've already started working on the Aperture Amaran Flex lights because I'm like, damn, this is like also similar ballpark price, like 18.99 for two. But I don't want to get too big into this, but you know, I'm not afraid to modify lights or
mm-hmm.
think, oh my God, if I did this or I put Velcro on the front, then I could, put a different frame on it. And so, but I also know if I show up with that light, it's going to work. Its color is going to be excellent. And, like this, it's a full color, full spectrum light. So I just think being really smart about what's out there in these value brands uh, is really important for like small owner operators because as well as I do like I'll give you a good example. I had a friend of mine who owns a big rental. I won't say which one, but he owns a big rental house in New York City, and he was poo pooing like Aperture, poo pooing Nanlite, and and then suddenly he's starting to get like all these requests, so he had
Right.
to you know, get on board. And he's like, well, but I don't make any money. It's only like for this light, well, it's 6.99. How do I'm not going to make any money. He would rather buy a $4,000 light that he could rent for 250 a day or whatever it is. And I'm like, yeah, but here's the thing for me, I'm getting a $2,500 budget. It's not like they're going to drop it down to 12. It's like my budget's 2,500. So for 2,500, if I could bring that many more lights to the party,
Right.
that's a really good thing for me. So I don't feel like he felt like he was losing money. I felt like I'm still renting the same dollar, but instead of
Mm-hmm.
bringing two lights, I could bring six lights or whatever. I mean, there's
Right.
a proportion where the value lights can really pay off, and particularly if you're dealing with limited budgets, which seems to be the case for me more often than not these days.
Yeah,
Little
especially
doc
post-COVID.
interviews, yeah, I mean, it's still, there's still budgets that are 1,200 or 15 or 2,500. I'm not talking about like the $5,000, $6,000 jobs, but being able to bring a lot of options to the party is really nice. And so you just have to figure, like, look, if you need to do cues and all that, okay, it's not the light for you, not the light for that job. But
Right.
other times where I'm really just setting levels, choosing colors, I need a projector, I need a Fresnel, I need a lantern, whatever. This is just a fantastic solution, and I can have multiple ones, with me, which is, and it's not costing the client crazy money for me to
Right.
bring four of these, right? You look at like how much I have to rent a, Light Mat 2L Spectrum for, I could not that those are comparable fixtures, but it's just sort of a cost basis. So these have stepped in as the new hero in terms of specials, and largely I've been using them on backgrounds, but I see it coming that I'll be using them as uh, key lights and umbrellas and lanterns, more and more.
Yeah, just having the accessories with you, gives you that option. I'm with you. I bring everything with me. And
Yeah,
even if the client doesn't ask for it, because as you know, there's so many things you don't know until you're there, even if you get
yeah,
location photos. And, I shot a interview with Patrick Mahomes the other day and Matt Hasselbeck, and we were in a little press room at Arrowhead Stadium.
yeah,
And, I needed something really, really small to boom in between them to just wrap
yeah.
our keys because our keys were really profiley. And I just wanted to wrap our keys around the side of their face. We didn't have any room on the other side for Phil. And I put that little 60C up with the lantern, skirted it, and I had it at like
Mm-hmm.
20%, and
Yeah,
it was beautiful. And the DP,
yeah,
he looked over and he was like, "What is that? That's an amazing light."
yeah.
And I'm
Well,
thinking, everywhere I go, I get compliments on not my cream source for it. Oh, I shouldn't say anything. I'm going to cut this
yeah,
out. Everywhere I go, I get compliments, not always on my most expensive fixtures, but
right.
often lately on the 60C.
Well, it's interesting you said that because I would say I get asked every time I pull these out, I get asked about them by the DP. We were shooting an exercise video out at, I don't know, Equinox or something in Bridgehampton. And we had a bunch of these because they suddenly on the day decided they wanted to have these weird colors in the background. They wanted to
Mm,
match this previous footage. Now I was actually gripping on that job for a friend of mine who was gaffing, and I brought my truck. And so I had a whole bunch of these, and lo and behold, the DP was like, "What is that light?" And like he's like, "That is really bright." And I'm like, "Yeah." And I said, "Look, it's only at 30% right now." And like he couldn't wrap his head around he's
right.
like, "Well, how many watts is this?" Because he's like, "This feels like an Airy like Airy 650 ish." And I'm like, "Well, it's probably not quite, but it's not far from that amount of output, especially like when you put the Fresnel on, you're getting some, it's acting as a bit of an intensifier as well as,
Totally.
shaping the beam. And we weren't even using the projectors. We were just using the Fresnels to throw these funky colors they wanted on the back walls to match something they had previously done. And, I will point out that they had sent me because I had a couple glitches I found when I was on set that day. We went to lunch and turned off the light and came back and turned it on. We were in hue sat mode with a particular sat hue dialed in and a particular intensity. Now, normally when a light's turned off and then back on again, it resets to the same values. But we were only at like a hue angle of like, forget 15 or 20. And when it turned back on, it reset the hue angle to 0. All the other things were the
Mm,
same. And we didn't catch it for a few takes. And the DP said, "Did you adjust the color in the background?" I'm like, "No, I didn't touch anything. Everything's the
mm.
same." And I went and looked at the light. So then I emailed and Barry over at Nanlite, and he's like, "Yeah, that's in the next firmware. It's a bug. We fixed it." So they're supposed to push out, if they haven't already, it's like any day now, they're pushing out a firmware update, which is super simple because it goes in the USB port. Um, and that fixed a number of tiny, small bugs that I had discovered, or they had already discovered, but it was the first time I had discovered it. So at least it's good to know they're on that firmware, getting feedback from people that are having issues and getting things fixed. Not yet the gel mode, but I was told that's coming, but I didn't get a release date for that. So if you do get these, they'll most likely have the newer firmware, but it's always good to check and make sure you're operating the most recent firmware.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I'm going to wrap it up here, John. I
Yep.
just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for what you've done in Gaffer Salon and all your
Yeah.
expertise. And thanks for hopping on the phone with me to discuss all this stuff. Really
Yeah.
appreciate you being a guest here and letting us know how you use the Forza 60Cs on your on-set workflow.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate what you're doing. I've certainly bought my Smoke Genie and my Vortex 4s, and I'm a big fan of Kitless. So I'm looking forward to it.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.